Greetings, Diane Francis here. I'm honorary patron with the Peterson Literary Fund, and we have a discussion ahead to look forward to with two distinguished journalists. I'm a journalist from Canada and a member of the Atlantic Council, and we have Yaroslav, who is from Ukraine originally, but is the chief correspondent with the Wall Street Journal concerning foreign matters. And we have Mikhail, who is originally from Russia. He's in exile, and he lives in New York City, and he writes books, and he's worked all over the world, and he contributes to Der Spiegel currently, among other publications. So we find ourselves at an interesting inflection point in this horrible war between Russia and Ukraine. So what people are interested in is, from your perspectives, and you both have covered the war, you understand the cultures and the politics. I'll start with you, Yaroslav. Where do you think we are? Where is it going? And is anybody going to win, or is this going to come to a draw? And what about Trump's deadline?
It's really a very ungrateful business to be predicting the way wars go. I mean, wars are unpredictable by their very nature, and they're not linear in the way they develop. We've had nearly 3 years now of horrible, bloody war of attrition in which hundreds of thousands of people on both sides were killed or maimed. And it's not really a conflict that can continue in this shape for another 2 or 3 years.
Can't.
I don't think it can.
Okay.
Russia is running out of people, running out of material, and both sides are looking at ways of transforming this war, of reshaping the nature of the conflict. We've seen Ukraine trying to advance into Russia with the Kursk offensive in August, and relying more and more on long-range strikes into Russia that aim to cripple Russian military industries, and in the future may try to cripple Russia's ability to export oil and therefore fund the war. So I think 2025 will bring lots of surprises in this war, and as you said, there will be a new administration in Washington that said it wants to achieve peace in Ukraine. It hasn't said how. And
by January 20th?
Well, yes. Actually, initially they said within 24 hours of the election. That deadline has already passed. I think the problem that we'll find is that what many in the Trump circle think is a very generous deal for Russia is actually a fraction of what Russia wants. And they will very quickly come to a realization that things are actually not as simple as they thought.
Which is why they're at war.
Which is why there's a war, and which is why it's very hard to end a war once it's started.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that Russia's goals in this conflict haven't changed since the very beginning, and it's the annihilation of Ukraine as an independent state that can decide its own future. And we've seen proof of that when the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz decided to call President Putin, to sound out whether peace is possible. He walked away from that with the realization that, as he put it, very little has changed in President Putin's mindset since they last spoke nearly 3 years ago.
And what's your take on it? What's your perspective, Mikhail?
Unfortunately, I can tell you that a lot of people in Russia, in Moscow, Russian elite, think that Putin is winning, and especially after Trump's election, they feel that they are winning, globally, ideologically. And Putin has a very interesting speech the next day after the presidential election in America, claiming that liberal democracy as the ideology is outdated, and no one believes in it. And that's his explanation for Trump's victory. And he expects much more people in the West to stop asking him questions. And he offers new type of ideology for the world, and that's global cynicism. So yeah, truly he believes in some kind of very profitable for him deal with Donald Trump. Russian elite thinks that the negotiations would start right after the inauguration, and a lot of people believe that by April, for example, that's going to be the pause in the war. At the same time, definitely everyone agrees that Putin is not interested in peace. He doesn't want to end this war because, after all, he started enjoying it. He controls the situation in the country. He can mobilize the country. He got rid of all the dissent. So he definitely has a lot of plans, and as Yaroslav said, still goals. His goals are still ahead of him, but he's ready to make a pause.
But there are economic problems inside the Russian economy, and the military is not really functioning very well either. And I just wondered if those kind of cracks, the ruble's down, the stock markets and so on, are going to start to force Putin to maybe put an end to it rather than just have a never-ending war.
There are problems, definitely. But I don't think that, Russian economy is such a weird thing. The stability of the state does not depend on the well-being of the population. There is enough resources to feed the army, the intelligence, security forces, and the prison system, and not to care about GDP and about salaries and pensions.
So they're very small,
all the rest.
private economy.
Yeah, so they care about the economy, but not that much. He needs the pause in the war. That would make his government and business elite much more happy. But actually, he prefers to continue it because that's the real guarantee for him to stay in power forever.
Yaroslav, that sounds pretty frightening, I think, from everybody's point of view, that he would just keep waging war like this on a low grade. What do you think of that, and how long could the Ukrainians last under that scenario, and what would the Americans have to do?
I agree with Mikhail that I think it's safer for Putin to continue the war than to end the war on something that he could not sell as a victory. And there are two things, sort of parameters of any eventual deal. One is territory, and it's the less important one. I don't think it's as important how much territory Ukraine de facto sacrifices to Russia. I don't think Ukraine will ever formally recognize annexation, but de facto it might have to renounce some land. But that's the less important part. I think the more important part is what happens to the rest of Ukraine, to the 80% of the country or more that are under Ukrainian control, and will that bulk of Ukraine be able to remain truly independent, will be able to retain military force that will deter further Russian invasions, will be able to join the European Union, will be able to receive Western military assistance. And that's, I think, the crux of the problem, because politically it will be very hard for the Russian elites, for Putin, to accept a Ukraine that is firmly attached to the West, that will not fall into Russia's lap in the future, because that would be a strategic defeat in this war for Russia.
So no
Even
NATO,
if they keep Crimea,
no NATO membership. That's a given.
That's key principle. Yeah.
No Crimea for Ukraine.
Never say never.
Yes.
Things change in history. If you look at the conflicts in former Yugoslavia, Croatia signed a deal as an armistice back in the 90s, acknowledging the loss of large territories, and then several years later, when Serbia was much weakened, they gained them back.
Yeah, actually, I think we are discussing very temporary state. It's all relevant till his death, yes. Because after he dies, the regime inevitably collapses within
Putin?
I don't know, weeks or months or
Putin?
years. Yeah,
really?
yeah.
Oh, you think it's that fragile?
Yeah, obviously.
Well, that's interesting.
I mean, it's a very personalized regime. If you look at the way Russia is run now, it is more centralized on one person that it has ever been.
Like a monarchy.
If you look at the Soviet history, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we now have access to all the deliberations of the Politburo and the ruling organs of the state. They had a thorough discussion, weighing the pros and the cons, what would happen. They still made the wrong decision, but at least they had a discussion. Here, the Russian foreign minister didn't even know about the plan to invade Ukraine. So it was really a decision made by Putin and a handful of people around him.
And there is no discussion, but what's weird, during the last 10 years, Putin has publicly claimed that the decision to invade Afghanistan was right. And that's something really new in the estimate of that period, of that terrible period of Soviet history. He's the first Russian, historian to consider not to consider invasion of Afghanistan as a terrible mistake.
As a terrible mistake. One thing that I find very interesting is since Trump has essentially imposed a deadline. He wants this over with, he says, by the day within his inaugural period of January 20th. Zelensky has signaled that he would cede territory in return for guarantees, security guarantees, i.e. an invitation from NATO would do the trick, whatever. He's also pitched a very interesting business proposition to the Americans and Europeans and said that, you're going to have access, we'll give you access to a resource base that is the size of Canada's, which is really the case in Ukraine. Enormous wealth and natural resources. We'll turn it into a powerhouse. We'll be just fine. And that, of course, appeals to Trump's donors, who are multinational companies and very wealthy billionaires. So Zelensky has reacted to the election of Trump by applying a business method toward getting him to help. Putin, on the other hand, has said nothing, nothing. So I wondered what you think of Zelensky's interesting signaling, because it's very attractive and it's very smart, very cunning. And in the light of the fact that Putin says nothing, what's going to happen?
I think Zelensky was misinterpreted. I don't think he ever said that he's ready to sacrifice territory in exchange for promises of NATO membership. He said that the priority for Ukraine is a security guarantee that will allow the rest of Ukraine to survive. And that comes first before any discussions about regaining territory, which is in the short term.
But he opened the door to, okay, we'll think about it.
And all of that obviously has to come within the framework of a referendum, a new election in Ukraine. Zelensky has no authority to give away any territory, or even Ukraine's NATO aspiration, which is part of the constitution.
Would be subject to approval.
Right. So all that will have to be decided by the Ukrainian people once they have options. And I think in all these discussions about Trump, America is an important country and it's played an important role in helping Ukraine. But if you look at the flows now, most aid to Ukraine comes not from America, it comes from European nations and other allies. And those countries, even without Trump, do have the resources to help Ukraine in the long term.
And I think they realize that.
And they realize them, and that's why they're increasing their involvement. And certainly many European countries, such as Poland, such as the Nordics, have a very direct stake in what's happening in Ukraine, and they see that war in Ukraine as a direct threat to their own national security. And so I think obsessing about what will Trump do, what will Trump say, is perhaps a waste of our time, because not just Trump has an agency in what happens in Ukraine.
Oh, I think it's all up to Putin. What was Putin thinking right now?
I think he doesn't think that he has to offer anything.
Exactly.
He can offer peace. And his idea that the post-Second World War order is dead, and he dreams of organizing some kind of new Yalta agreement, and he wants to sit down with Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, as Stalin did with Churchill and Roosevelt, and he's expecting them to divide the world with him.
Carve up the world.
That's quite a delusional plan. But we remember Donald Trump meeting Kim Jong-un and trying to make it look like a diplomatic success. So probably...
But there was no deal, right? At the end, he walked away.
Yeah. But Putin thinks that New World Order would be some kind of a deal that could fancy Donald Trump as he is the founding father of the New World. And that's the dream or the nightmare for many that Putin is offering.
Right. So Putin's not going to do anything. He's going to be passive-aggressive. He's not going to say, oh, by the way, we'll signal, we'll do this or that. There's a little wiggle room. We would like peace. We would like a ceasefire, which, of course, isn't what Ukraine wants.
No,
but
if we consider him to be a terrorist, he is offering to put his gun into his pocket. That's what usually terrorists negotiate about.
He's not going to put his
In
gun
exchange
his
for the other
pocket.
guy.
He loves the war. He's enjoying the war.
He's ready to just to put it away behind his back for a moment or for an hour.
So what is your guess? What are your guesses that Trump will do in light of a passive-aggressive Russia who actually likes the status quo exactly as it is, even though it's not that sustainable for them in the long run, and a Ukraine that is kind of caught in the middle?
Well, a deal in which, Russia redivides Europe into a sphere of influence is a deal in which Trump gives something for nothing. And it's not a lot of incentive for Trump to do it because at the end of the day, the cost to America of the war in Ukraine going on is marginal. It's the European economies that have suffered from cutting off Russian oil gas supplies, for example, structurally.
Yes.
I mean, America has not suffered. I mean, the impact on America of that war is minimal. And it's hard to see the justification for sacrificing so much for so little if you are the president of the United States. Mm-hmm. And that's why Putin's idea is delusional, because at the end of the day, Russia is not a strong country like the Soviet Union was. It does not have a place at the table of the superpowers. It's China now.
Correct.
And Russia has to rely on Iranian weapons and North Korean mercenaries to fight its war in Ukraine because it doesn't have reserve of its own troops.
Mm-hmm. What's your take? What is Putin thinking now?
I think he's thinking that the time is on his side.
Okay.
And that's clearly not so, because he's got the illusion that he's the only one who is the experienced and who is timeless. And he doesn't have to care about real action. He doesn't have to care about public opinion polls. So he can outlive all of them. And he doesn't think that he's running out of people, which is not actually 100% true. Yeah, the situation gets worse, and the worse the economy, the more he's dependent on the probably new draft. For now, he's okay with just paying people, paying to the people of the most depressive regions of Russia,
yes,
enough for their wives to sell them to the army, to persuade the women just to get rid of their husbands and having some amount instead. But the time is not on his side, obviously, and probably he doesn't understand that. And as usually in Russia, the situation can turn upside down any moment, and he doesn't understand that. And I remember that, for example, when the invasion has just started, majority of Russian political business elite was shocked, yes, and was thinking that was his fatal decision. They were saying he's not going to get away with it. That's the end. Now they think differently. Now they think that, he's lucky again. He got away with it. But that cannot happen again and again.
And their money is all outside of Russia in banks in the United States or real estate. They live the high life. I mean, they're really not affected by the war. And my understanding is that as far as conscription, they're not taking young people from Moscow and St. Petersburg to go into this war. As you said, they're using ethnic minorities from depressed portions.
Not only ethnic minorities, but mostly people from around the provinces.
Yeah, yeah. So, what's going to happen January 20th?
President Trump will be inaugurated.
Nothing will have changed.
I think quite a lot can happen before that, because we see that Biden administration is ready to experiment, and at the same time they know that, at least we see that Putin is reluctant in his to react aggressively. He's waiting for Trump. He doesn't want to spoil the feast, so he's much more passive, and he always thinks that it's better not to make quick decisions and quick reactions. He loves reacting in a month or in 6 months. So he won't do anything unexpected before January, before the inauguration, and that's room for Biden Biden administration to invent something.
What if President Trump, who I think would like to go down in history as the guy who ended this terrible war, what if he says, we're increasing the weapons we're giving to Ukraine? Come on, this can't go on forever. I gave you a deadline. You're doing nothing. You're saying nothing. And, just have at it, boys. Here's some more missiles, long range. Keep going at it. Let's attack their oil ships in the Baltic, in the Black Sea. Let's cut off their income. What if he escalates? That has not happened yet. That is the other thing, the other card that he's got to play.
It's hard to predict what Trump will do, but I think judging by the appointments he's made in the national security sort of realm that will deal with Russia, the strategy is likely to be escalate to de-escalate. So put up pressure, more pressure on Russia to then force them into a deal.
Yes.
And what shape it will take, what risks they will be taking once in office. Again, I think one of the strongest qualities of the Trump administration before was its unpredictability. So he kept his enemies and his friends off balance. And it's a strategic asset, whereas the Biden administration told everyone in advance everything it's going to do, giving its enemies time to prepare and to minimize the impact of his actions.
And by the way, the United States is staggeringly wealthy, as we know. And I don't want to belittle the aid that they've given, the military aid they've given to Ukraine in this war, but it's about $60 billion a year. That's what Americans spend buying video games, okay? This is nothing. So I think that Trump would know this. I think that Mr. Putin may be in for a surprise. So on that note, gentlemen, great conversation, and let's hope this war is over soon for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.